There's a story in the gospel that will probably only require me telling you a single line to bring the whole story to mind. Let's see if that's true. Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing." It's the story where Jesus had come to visit Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus. Martha was burdened with much serving while Mary sat at our Lord's feet. Martha wanted Jesus to make her sister Mary help her. Martha usually gets a bad rap in this reading, but it's easy to sympathize with her, isn't it? Even more so when we realize Jesus wasn't alone. He likely had many of his disciples with him, so Martha wasn't just getting Jesus some light refreshments. She was probably trying to take care of 15 or 20 people and ensure they were comfortable and satisfied. You've probably heard this story used to illustrate many insights about our faith over the years. Martha is the doer. Mary is the prayer. Martha exemplifies active spirituality. Mary, a contemplative one, and so on. All excellent and useful in that they point out certain truths about our faith and how it is manifest that there's a time and place for everything. A time to serve and a time to sit at our Lord's feet and listen. Mary chose correctly and Martha didn't this time. Perhaps the next time will be the time for action first and contemplation later. By the way, I've always wondered where Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus was that whole time. Nothing was said at all of him. He probably saw the dishes piling up and suddenly remembered a project he'd been meaning to start out in the woodshed. In any case, tonight I'd like to consider Martha and Mary from a slightly different angle that I hope will be useful as well. Notice what was common to both Martha and Mary. Both were in the presence of the Lord. They both loved him, and they were both loved by him. Both faced the same circumstances and situation, but only one was at peace. Only Mary remained in Jesus' presence, as it were. Martha saw the situation unfolding around her and became frantic, trying to serve all the guests. A legitimate concern, of course, a real need, but not one that necessitated giving up her peace. Not one that required her to remove herself from the Lord's presence or demand others do so. Martha's reaction is reminiscent of Peter, who boldly asked the Lord to tell him to come to him as Jesus was walking on the water toward the boat that Peter was in. Though the weather raged around him, Peter walked on the water too, as long as he kept his focus on the Lord. When he started paying attention to his circumstances more than to the Lord, he almost drowned. And therein lies the lesson for us. We can dwell in God's presence always. We can always be at peace. Not just at Mass, not just when we're in prayer, but always. Perhaps you're thinking, oh, you mean when everything is generally going my way, when I'm all caught up on the bills, when everyone I love is safe and healthy, when my job is secure and my spouse and I are getting along and everyone thinks well of me. Well, no, for that's the kind of peace the world gives, the only kind it can, really. Work hard, assert your will, be better than anyone else, be successful or just be plain lucky, get everything just the way you want it, and then you will be at peace, says the world. That's not the peace God gives or even calls us to. His peace far exceeds that. It remains regardless of our circumstances. Think about it. Martha and Mary were faced with the exact same situation. Mary was at peace. Martha wasn't. Mary discerned that the Lord's will in this situation was to sit at his feet and listen. Martha asserted her will, take care of the guests. Legitimate in itself, but who was at peace and who wasn't? The storm for Peter was no different when he was walking on the water than when he almost drowned. It was just as dangerous. The difference was he started to sink when he didn't keep his eyes on Jesus. The peace that Jesus gives is not a feeling. It's not based on circumstances. It's based on knowing his will. Jesus was at peace in the Garden of Gethsemane, in his agony, carrying the cross to Calvary, and even on the cross, every bit as much as when he was giving the Sermon on the Mount, when he triumphantly entered Jesus to Jerusalem, to the adulation of the people, and when he was sharing a meal with his friends and disciples. Because he was doing the will of the Father in all those situations, he remained in his presence and at peace. But don't imagine that the peace of God puts us in some kind of passive state. Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary never lost that peace, and one could hardly accuse them of being passive. Remaining in his peace requires effort on our part, sometimes even heroic effort, but effort powered by grace. And if we lose this inner peace, which may happen frequently for you and me, that is a sure sign we need to examine our lives and determine why. Are we letting the troubles and trials of this world get to us by relying on our own strength rather than God's grace? Are we afraid of doing without material comforts or security? Are we afraid of suffering or of others finding out we're not who they think we are? We must never tire of doing what is right, of forgiving and asking forgiveness, of doing what is best for others rather than for ourselves, of keeping our commitments and trusting his grace will give us the strength to do so. This is how we remain at peace, no matter what the circumstances.